The Ohio and Indiana Bar Associations require we give the addresses of the attorneys on the show. So first we have Angela Greene, 7415 Burlington Pike in Florence, 859-525-0500, and Dawn Moore, of course, the Moore Law Firm, 1060 Nimitzview Drive, 232-2000, morelaw.com, or again, you can just go to fox19.com and click on the Moore Law tab. Now, Dawn, you had some pictures that you wanted to show as an example of, I think you called it hidden injuries?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Deb. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is many of the injuries that occur from a wreck, sometimes the most serious injuries, aren't readily apparent. We have a photo of a truck accident that we handled a number of years ago, and you can see the damages, you can see the damage to the car. This individual suffered a broken leg, and everybody knew right then that he had a broken leg as a result of the accident. That's not a hidden injury. But what they didn't know is, that, and he didn't even know at the time, that he had a problem, a disease, celiac sprue was the name of it, that as a result of that trauma, that disease became prominent. It affected his eyesight. Frankly, the damages and injuries he suffered that were hidden in the beginning and later became apparent were much worse than the damages and injuries that were readily apparent. That also has to do when a person has depression following an injury, which is very common. A brain injury oftentimes is late, it doesn't show itself right away. And then you have a personality change. Depression, there's a lot of things that people don't recognize right up front. That's a very important aspect of injuries. If you or a loved one is involved in something that has a significant impact, a serious injury, think a little bit about how this has affected their daily life, because it can make a big, big difference. That can be the larger part of the claim. Angela, you've had cases like that, haven't you?
I have, not quite as severe as that, but I'll just give you an example. Rear end collision, just a slight tap. There was absolutely no property damage done to either vehicle. The plaintiff otherwise seemed healthy, did not report an injury. Later shows up at the hospital with severe headaches, vomiting, nausea, inability to stand. After a series of tests and diagnoses, she was diagnosed with benign positional vertigo, which basically means the little crystals in your ear got jousted and messed up, such that she was very ill. And it took quite a bit of medical attention to get those back in balance. And they use magnets to do that sort of thing. So what looked like was going to be a modest, very modest claim escalated into something major.
That happens. That happens.
When you see these kinds of things, does it frustrate you sometimes, because there's a whole lot of people out there who say, of course somebody's going to sue. Oh, you know, there was a tap on my car and I wasn't really hurt, but I'm going to come up with all these symptoms. But what you see is very real.
Absolutely. Now, don't get me wrong. There are those out there who will abuse the system. It's, you know, there's always a bad apple in one bunch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every claim that sounds a little bit out there is not legit. And that's why, as Ronald Reagan would say, trust but verify. If somebody tells you something, go have it checked out, and if it's there, it's there.
Okay. All right. Great. We have time for a couple more calls. Let's see. First we have, what do we have? Carol in Northern Kentucky. Carol, this has to do with your son was in jail, and I'm sorry, this is Ed?
Yes.
Ed from Cincinnati. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, I have a question about basically being treated by a doctor. Doctor's been treating me for 8 years, and I've had 78% blockage back then. And I've had 3 mini strokes in the last 2 months, and now my blockage is 189%. 100 on one side and 89% the other, and there's nothing they can do. So I was just curious if there's anything, legally I could do about, having a doctor that's been taking care of me all this time, has never made a point to it.
Okay, we have just about a minute or so left in the show if we can give him any information.
Okay, so Ed, there's a couple issues that come up, and let me just make it real brief. Basically, get another medical opinion and learn whether or not what your doctor, the treatment that the doctor gave you was somehow substandard. If it's substandard, then you may have a claim, and the claim would be the difference between what the result would have been if he'd have done it right versus the way he did it. So first you need a medical opinion. If you suspect your doctor's treatment was substandard and you can't get anybody to say, then you're just going to have to talk to a lawyer, and perhaps they can get an opinion from a doctor who's not around this area. So I hope that helps. I do have one question for you real quick.
Yes,
How
sir.
do insurance defense lawyers get paid?
Fortunately for the public, they're paid by the insurance companies.
And how do they get paid?
They're paid by the hour.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for
we
being
will
here.
See you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. We'll see you next week on More Law, where we will be talking about, can your boss do that? See you next morning at 9:30.